Why does Swan Lake hurt in a way that feels strangely beautiful? There's a kind of sadness in its melodies that doesn't ask for pity. It demands remembrance. It floats like a dream you once had and then lost. When Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky composed Swan Lake, he wasn't just writing a ballet. He was burying something, maybe a secret, maybe a love, maybe a part of himself he couldn't speak aloud. It's easy to forget now, but Swan Lake was a failure when it premiered. The audience didn't get it, the critics dismissed it, and yet today, it's eternal. What happened between rejection and resurrection? What is this music really about? Some say it's a fairy tale, others say it's a mirror. But one thing is certain, Swan Lake is not just a story of swans. It's a story of masks, longing, and the cost of hiding who you are. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the truth, just beneath the surface of the water. When Tchaikovsky began writing Swan Lake in 1875, he wasn't chasing fame. He was escaping. On paper, he was a respected composer, but behind closed doors, he as unraveling. He had just ended a turbulent love affair with a young student. His finances were unsteady, and most of all, he lived in fear, not of critics or competition, but of being found out. Tchaikovsky was gay in a time when such a truth was unspeakable. To be exposed could mean ruin, or worse. So he did what artists have always done. He turned the unsayable into sound. The music of Swan Lake, its longing, its tension, its haunting echoes, was not born from fairy tales. It was born from a man at war with himself. The swan, some say, is Tchaikovsky, trapped in elegance, condemned to silence, beautiful and cursed. And as he wrote, he wasn't just composing a ballet. He was crafting a confession no one would recognize until it was too late. The tale of Swan Lake seems simple at first. A princess, Odette, is cursed to live as a swan by day, human by night. Only true love can break the spell. But every fairy tale hides something darker. Odette's double, the black swan Odile, is not just a trickster. She is the reflection of everything Odette fears: seduction, deception, power. Together they are light and shadow, innocence and temptation, truth and disguise. But what if this isn't about two women? What if Odette and Odile are one? Two halves of a single self, torn between who she is and who she must pretend to be. Tchaikovsky knew that tension well. He lived it. By day, the perfect composer. By night, a man full of longing, fear, and forbidden desire. In Swan Lake, he gave those parts wings and let them circle each other in an endless dance. One swan is never enough to tell the whole truth. You don't need to understand ballet to feel Swan Lake. From the first trembling notes, it wraps around you. Soft, slow, aching. It doesn't tell you a story. It gives you a feeling, like remembering something that never really happened. The main theme rises like mist over a frozen lake. It circles, swells, and sinks, never quite reaching resolution. This isn't music that wants to be heard. It wants to be felt. Tchaikovsky once said that music is not illusion, but revelation. And in Swan Lake, he reveals something almost unbearable, the sound of yearning, of beauty slipping away, of love that's real, but impossible. There's a moment, just a few bars in, when the violins hold their breath. And in that silence, you can hear everything: grief, longing, and the quiet resignation that not every story can be rewritten. It's not just sad, it's honest. And honesty in Tchaikovsky's world was the most dangerous thing of all. When Swan Lake premiered at the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow in 1877, it wasn't met with awe, it was met with silence. The audience fidgeted. The critics were unimpressed. One even called it unworthy of attention. Tchaikovsky, devastated, withdrew. He had poured himself into the score, and the world turned its back. Some blamed the choreography, others the dancers, the staging, the rushed rehearsal schedule. Critics said the music was too heavy, too symphonic for ballet, comparing it to the dramatic style of Wagner. But maybe the truth was harder to face. They just weren't ready. They weren't ready for music that didn't flatter, that didn't dance to please. Tchaikovsky had written Swan Lake not as a fantasy, but as a reflection of himself, of duality, of a soul stretched between beauty and fear. The world wanted fairy tales. He gave them something real, and real takes time to understand. Odile doesn't dance like Odette. She doesn't flutter. She owns the stage, sharp, magnetic, unapologetically bold. When she appears, the music changes. Suddenly, everything is faster, louder, dangerous. She's the villain of Swan Lake, but not in the way fairy tales usually write them. She doesn't curse anyone. She doesn't trap a soul. She simply seduces by being what Odette can't. Odile is power without shame, desire without restraint, the shadow self dressed in black and draped in confidence. And maybe that's exactly what terrified Tchaikovsky's world. In Odile, we meet the part of the self that's been silenced, the part that refuses to apologize for existing. Some believe she's not even real, that she's just the prince's projection, or worse. Odette's suppressed desire finally taking form. What if Swan Lake isn't a battle between good and evil, but between what we show and what we hide? Maybe Odile isn't the enemy. Maybe she's the truth we've been trained to fear. Tchaikovsky lived in a world that demanded silence. To be openly gay in 19th century Russia wasn't just dangerous, it was unthinkable. So he spoke through music. Many believe Swan Lake is more than a ballet. It's a code, a confession in disguise, a prince torn between two loves, a truth hidden behind illusion, a swan cursed to live a life that isn't truly his. Does that sound familiar? Some scholars suggest that Odette and Odile aren't women at all, but masks, versions of self. Odette, the ideal, graceful, tragic, acceptable. Odile, the forbidden, powerful, desired, rejected. And the prince caught between them never really sees either for who they are, just as the world never saw Tchaikovsky for who he was. He couldn't write his story with words, so he wrote it with strings. And every time Swan Lake is performed, his secret is played again, for those who know how to listen. For years, Swan Lake was forgotten. After its failed debut, theaters moved on. Tchaikovsky died in 1893, never knowing the world would one day listen. But just over a year later, something changed. In early 1895, the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg staged a new version. New choreography, a revised structure, but the same music, untouched. And suddenly, it worked. The tragedy landed, the beauty bloomed, audiences wept. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. Tchaikovsky was gone, but his music spoke louder than ever. Why then? Maybe the world had finally caught up. Maybe we needed that kind of sadness, that kind of truth, wrapped in fantasy, masked in myth, but real beneath the surface. Since then, Swan Lake has never left us. It's been reborn again and again, on every major stage, in film, in fashion, in our dreams. It's more than a ballet now. It's a ritual, a remembering. a haunting echo that never quite fades. Why does Swan Lake still live? Why, more than a century later, do we still feel its ache? Maybe it's because we recognize ourselves in it, even if we don't know why. We've all worn masks, played roles, longed for something just out of reach. We've all been the swan, graceful on the outside, desperate underneath. In a world obsessed with clarity, Swan Lake offers mystery. In a culture chasing perfection, it embraces imperfection. It lets sadness breathe. It lets longing linger. And somehow that feels like relief. Tchaikovsky wrote it in secret. We hear it in public. And somewhere between the notes, a part of us is exposed. Maybe we don't cry because it's tragic, but because it's true. It doesn't give us answers. It gives us reflection. And sometimes that's more powerful than any ending. Swan Lake ends in silence, sometimes with death, sometimes with redemption, but always with a question. Did love conquer the curse? Or was the curse love itself? Tchaikovsky doesn't give us answers. He gives us something more enduring. A mirror. Maybe it's about identity, about illusion, about the parts of us that must perform, just to belong. It's about the longing we silence, the truths we bury in elegance, and the ache of never being fully seen. And in that sense, Swan Lake isn't just a ballet, it's a confession, played out on a stage of symbols, shadows, and sound. But if you listen closely, beyond the choreography, beyond the applause, and beyond the notes, you might hear something else, a question echoing in the dark. What part of yourself have you hidden just to survive? If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.